from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased. Joining me from Australia, Kee Jefferys. Kee, thank you very much for being here with me today. The way I love to do it, as I was explaining to you before we started the recording, I keep it usually to my guests to introduce themselves, to tell us more about their background, their journey, what they are currently up to. Just as a teaser for the audience, we're gonna talk a lot today about privacy, end-to-end encryption in the messaging space, AI, and blockchain. So without further ado, I will leave the floor to you, Kee.
Awesome. Hey guys, good to be here. My name's Kee. I'm working on the Session project. Have been doing that for about 7.5 years at this point. So long time in the messaging space and also kind of tangentially in the crypto space as well. I serve kind of as one of the co-founders of Session, but also kind of more so on the technical side. So I've had the title of Chief Technical Officer before. I think nowadays just say that I'm a co-founder focusing on the technical side of things. So yeah, good to be here with you.
Great. Thank you again, Kee, for making it. Let's start with the story of what you're currently doing at Sessions. And, you said that you have experience in the messaging space. What's wrong? And what, as a co-founder, what was like the motive to start this project?
Yeah, well, I mean, what is wrong, I would say broadly, is that most messaging applications that are trying to focus on privacy don't focus on the kind of types of privacy which matter the most in terms of practical scenarios. So they're often not focusing on metadata collection, which, most of the end-to-end encrypted messengers that you have these days are end-to-end encrypted. So the intermediary that's, pulling around all of the messages can't see the message contents, but they can see all of the metadata, which is related to a message. And I think Session is one of the kind of premier messaging applications, private messaging applications, which is actually focusing on the metadata problem. We have implemented a lot of privacy enhancements on the metadata side to actually, hide users' metadata when they use Session. In terms of how we got here in the first place, we were this is 7.5 years ago, so it's quite some time ago, but we were looking at, some other blockchains that were coming out, privacy-based blockchains, which are providing transactional privacy, and then also incentivized chains kind of like Dash, which, is probably a blast from the past for people to hear that name because Dash hasn't done so well, in the last, 7.5 years. But Dash was kind of the first cryptocurrency to have this idea that you would have a network of nodes that was incentivized to actually perform some actions. And they were very early to that idea of like a master node network. So we were kind of looking at, decentralized networks like Tor, then also incentivized networks like Dash, and we thought about, okay, how can we combine these things together to have a incentivized network that's decentralized and provides privacy to its users? And that's what we kind of kicked off 7.5 years ago. And the product that we've actually built that a lot of people use is Session, and that operates on top of that network infrastructure that we started a long time ago.
Cool. Now, Kee, maybe the first thing that comes to people's mind, I think, everyone, and you explained it like how the end-to-end encryption, and I'm just putting quote unquote, it has what people would know it as a backdoor. You mentioned about the metadata and everything. It's funny enough, like how yesterday I was trying to explain to people, like, for example, I don't know if I would be in trouble, but let's say one of the biggest chat application very well known. I said maybe they will not know what you typed inside, but they would know how many times you wrote to the same people. Like they would know, if you had a audio call or a video call, they would know like how much that. Now on the other side, and policymakers and maybe some people, they would say, okay, we understand the privacy should be there, but how we countermeasure people who might use a completely anonymized, unbreakable encryption for something bad, especially people who put the measurements for counterterrorism and things like that. So what's the answer for this?
Look, it's a very tricky question to answer. And as someone who works in the messaging space and is particularly focused on privacy and security, it's a question that we face every day. I think the most important thing is the way that you design your messaging application if you're trying to provide anonymity and privacy. And there's certain ways or there's certain features that you could add to a messaging application which would make it more misused. And there's certain features that you can add in which would make the application less misused. We're thinking about things like the ability to set up really large groups in the application and have those groups be discoverable just by typing in the search box, for example. That can create potential for a misuse of the application. So you can imagine if someone sets up a bad group and then someone joining the messaging service just types in the search box like the content that they're wanting to find, whether that be like drugs or something like that. They type in like drugs in the search and immediately they have a community, which is, tens of thousands of people talking about this topic, which is potentially, against the terms of service or against the laws of a certain country. So it's really the way that Session is designed is that it does provide that privacy and security to everyone who uses it, but the design is very intentional to make everything kind of consent based. So, when someone messages you, you have to explicitly accept their message request, and that cuts down on spam. We don't although we do have big communities in Session, they're not discoverable inside of the application. You actually have to get a link from an external service and then join that community. So there's a lot of things in Session's design which minimizes misuse while also still providing a very high level of privacy and security to users that are using the service. So I think it's really on that design side where the problems can be solved. But I will just say as well, I don't think the right approach to this is putting a wholesale backdoor into people's end-to-end encryption where the government can just read all of the messages. And that's some of what is being proposed from legislators right now. Just to give an example, we know the vast majority of crimes happen inside of the house, inside of people's houses, whether that be partners, abusing each other or money laundering or drugs trading. They happen a lot in residential houses, but we're not kind of saying at the same time that everyone should have a security camera installed in their house to watch them at all times, right? That would be a ridiculous notion.
Right.
Even though we know crime happens majority in people's houses. So we have to think about these things from a civil liberties perspective as well, and have to balance those concerns around design and misuse of the application too.
Great. Now, it's good you mentioned about, the attempts, especially we've seen it I know in Australia, you need a court approval for revealing, the messages. We've seen push in Europe. I think there was something related to even the Apple iMessage a few months ago. There was a big debate over there also as well. Are you seeing some countries heading toward the normalization of these backdoors and chat control, despite all the activists and the pushback from the larger community? Is this something? I'm asking this question because some people might not know alternatives like Session today. So do you think it will become kind of something normal? Okay, I would know that someone might be reading my message at some stage.
Yeah, I think the use of privacy, based messages which are specifically focusing on providing users a high level of privacy and security is increasing. We've seen that on the session side, but also other applications like Signal, for example, are seeing massive increase in users. And that is often tied to particular government legislation which is passed. So, for example, in Russia, recently we've seen a move from the Russian government to move users outside of an encrypted chat application into like a state-owned chat application, which they can see all of your messages and metadata in. And that's kind of led a lot of Russian users to look at alternatives like Signal and Session. On the other side, like from the legislation perspective, I do think that a lot of countries are moving in this direction. And I think, unfortunately, Australia and the UK have been the ones that have kind of been leading in some of this push. The chat control legislation as well was discussed extensively in the EU, and that's like kind of in the process of being passed. But there's a lot of pushback from, just general citizens in the EU against that type of legislation. And that's part of the reason as well that Session has moved its kind of the entity which actually kind of stewards the project to Switzerland. That doesn't provide, a lot of people say, oh, it's Swiss based, like that means it's super private. That's not actually where a lot of the privacy comes from. In Session, a lot of the privacy comes from the fact that you're not using phone numbers, you're using a decentralized network. And we're using onion routing to hide the IP addresses in the network as well. That's where a majority of the privacy comes. But you also need to think about, where the developers are based, like what the organization that funds the development of the teams are. And to have that, in Australia would be more risky from a legal perspective. And to have it in Switzerland, I think provides a very strong legislative framework. They have constitutional protections of privacy in Switzerland, which make it much easier. And it's not necessarily that you're even trying to avoid legislation. It's just that you want a clear legislative framework that you can build under, so that you know what's going to happen next week. If next week one of these governments just says, okay, we're going to ban all of this technology, that's it really impossible to build like a decentralized chat application around. So you need to kind of be thinking about these things before they come. And then Switzerland's been really ahead of the game for protecting people's privacy in that way.
Absolutely. Now, so just for non-technical audience, if I'm using Session today, and I had an issue with someone, which maybe I know, maybe I didn't know before, right? So even, technically it's not possible to go and track, when anything about this chat, unless the person shows the messages, if they still on their phones. Am I correct here?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of where Session differentiates itself from some of the other private messaging applications as well. If you consider, say, for example, Signal, in the kind of Signal case, Signal is running all of the servers. So they have centralized servers which they operate, and those servers relay your messages. So when you send a message to someone, it's going to go to the Signal servers, and the Signal servers are going to send it to that other user. So even though the messages are end-to-end encrypted, the Signal servers end up seeing a lot of metadata about what is happening in a conversation. Whereas in the Session case, the developers that work on Session don't actually run the servers in the network. That's a decentralized network of nodes. So about 1,600 nodes that are run by community members all across the world. So if someone comes to us and says, you need to give us the information about this chat, we don't actually run the servers that chat would have gone through. So they would have to go to the decentralized network of node operators and talk to them. But those node operators are all around the world. Some of them are anonymous. There's people all around the world, different jurisdictions. So that becomes much harder for their governments or third parties or hackers to be able to get access to users' information. And I think that's where we're in a unique position compared to all of the messaging applications which use a centralized service.
Yeah, when I was also checking on your website, one thing that caught my attention is the sign up is without giving email, without giving a phone number. the first thing that came to my mind, of course, there's some authentication mechanism in place. So if I forget my password or my authentication, what do I do? How I can recover?
So, I mean, some of your viewers and yourself would be familiar with the idea of creating a cryptocurrency wallet. And the basic idea there is when you create your wallet, you get this like 12 words and you write those 12 words down
Right.
on a piece of paper or you save them in your password manager. And as long as you have those 12 words, you can always recover your account. So you just need to back those up. And if your phone gets smashed or you drop it in the toilet or something like that, you can always come back with those 12 words and recover your account.
Cool. This is a clever mechanism, I would say, because for people who are not familiar with the cryptocurrencies, to Kee's point, when you create the wallet to recover it, they give us these like some words, random words, and then you need to save them somewhere, keep them in a safe. So this is good to know. And of course, this will give the anonymity, which is, again, it's similar to the cryptocurrency, so no one knows who owns actually, let's say, this account or username, whatever you want to call it. Now, from adoption perspective, I know, like, you've seen a significant tipping point of reaching over 1 million monthly users. How you've seen this? Like, was it a signal that people are looking for more privacy, more control over the messaging app they want to use? And from, maybe if you can explain, we don't want to go too much technical, but as much as possible, because you're relying on a community to host the nodes, right? So how the scalability can be achieved there for that massive amount of users monthly?
Yeah. So, like, from the perspective of our growth, it's been really good. I think the reason that is because Session is positioned in a very unique kind of way. There are other private messages out there, but most of them will require a phone number to sign up. And as soon as you link your phone number with your accounts, that creates both privacy risks and security risks. So, from a privacy perspective, we use our phone numbers basically everywhere. Like, we use them against our business name, or use them to sign up for a million different services that require your phone number. And if any of those services gets hacked, now your name and your email address and potentially your address is linked to your phone number. And if you're using that phone number as well on your messaging service, then your identity, it instantly becomes linked to all of the messages that you're sending on that messaging service. So that's a risk from a privacy perspective. From a security perspective, we have so many SIM swapping attacks these days, where people will call up your telecom provider and say, I'm this person, I need to reset my SIM, and the telecom provider will then send a new SIM to the other person or transfer it to the other person, and now they have access to your entire messaging account, for example. So that is a massive risk from the SIM perspective as well, which we didn't want to be beholden to, and we didn't want to create those security and privacy risks. From a perspective of like actually kind of getting people onto the platform, how it scales over time, I think Session at this point is probably dealing with hundreds of millions of messages, billions of messages since Session was started. The basic way that it remains scalable is that there is this network of 1,600 nodes. And what is actually being sent on the network is fairly small text messages. So they're actually not massive to store. If you send an average message, that's going to be like 1 kilobyte, which is very small considering that most people have, hard drives that are a terabyte. So that's, a lot of room to actually scale out. And the other thing that Session does quite uniquely is it actually kind of shards the network up into different segments, and those segments will store a portion of the messages for the network. So there's still, you get that redundancy, which you want to have, but it's not like every message is being stored on every node, which means that you get a lot more scalability from that perspective. And finally, the other thing that we do is every 14 days, the messages will be deleted from the network as well. So that provides not only a security benefit in terms of your messages aren't being stored forever, but it also provides like that scalability as well, because you're constantly wiping the old messages, which means you can store new messages in that place. So there's a lot more room for Session to scale up to many, many more users, even with the current infrastructure as it is.
I got it. So just quickly, can I still send photos or videos?
Yes.
Okay.
The way that works is that essentially you're sending a link in your message to the photo or the file, which is then uploaded to a different server. So you're not actually sending the file itself in the message. You're kind of sending a link to it, which means that there's not hundreds of gigabytes being stored on all of these different nodes.
Audio and video calls possible?
Yep, we have audio and video. So that's done right now, doing a peer-to-peer connection between the two users. So it doesn't flow through a server typically, depending on the network conditions, but most calls will happen peer-to-peer. And that means that kind of bandwidth consideration doesn't have to go through that network of nodes as well, because it's just two users talking directly to each other. And it's end-to-end encrypted as well.
Got it. So I think this is a proof, maybe, Key, and I know you talk about it, that messaging apps, they can be more than just consumer tools, because I know, like you argue, like it's a kind of a blockchain real world utility, right?
Yeah, certainly. There aren't too many blockchain applications that are out there that have the amount of users that Session has. And I think that's because the design has been so intentional to not kind of push people into the crypto aspect of things. There's a lot of onboarding issues that happen when you get people into crypto. And I think crypto has left a little bit of a bad taste in a bunch of people's mouths. A lot of people associate it with scams or meme coins. So when you sign up the Session, there's no like token that you have to get, or you don't have to onboard to a crypto like experience or pay or anything like that. It's a free application. You download it, you create an account, and you start sending. And all of the crypto aspect really happens at the incentivization layer for the node network. So that network of 1,600 nodes that is running, they're incentivized with a crypto token. And that's where the incentives lay. But for the user, they don't have to like directly engage with this system. We kind of have some backend systems so that they can engage with it, but they don't have to if they don't want to, which I think is the best way to kind of integrate crypto without kind of pushing it in people's face.
I like it, because to your point, and I discuss it with a lot of blockchain and crypto pioneers who all agreed, on the same thing you said, because of some of the, bad things that happens. So it affected the whole industry, I would say. So people think, oh, like it's a blockchain, it's crypto. Crypto means like these meme coins and the other things that we've seen, and they don't want to use it. They lose trust. But the good thing is we started now to see this shift again, especially with some other use cases. We started to see, like, for example, real world asset tokenization, and plenty of use cases. Even some governments are now endorsing the blockchain technology, which is fantastic. Now, when I want to come back to the surveillance, right, and now AI is making it more powerful. You just mentioned the use case, or like the example of doing the SIM swap and all this, and we know, like, with AI, deep fakes, and all these things, things are getting a little bit worse, and even it's also on the other side as well. So AI, it's making the surveillance, even from, let's say, authorities' perspective, easier, because you can detect, patterns. You can detect, some stuff. You can automate things at a large scale. How do you see the role of the decentralized privacy first apps, like what you're currently doing, in countering this trend?
Yeah, so I think the most interesting thing with AI that's going on right now is that, AI has these kind of concepts of scaling. So there's like different ways to scale up your AI, to make it better and to improve the system that people are chatting with, for example. And typically, like, you're looking at like 3 different like parameters that you can kind of plug into your AI model to make it better. One of them is data. So like the more data that you have to train on, the better the AI is typically going to be. The next is compute. And this is the reason that, people are building these massive data centers like all over the world right now to be able to maximize the compute that they can use to train and then for with their AI. And the third is like the actual like model design. Like there's a bunch of researchers that are working on more efficient ways to use the compute, more efficient ways to use data, for example. So like when you look at those 3 things, I think that the one that's kind of been explored to an extent is like training on more data. And we're already kind of at the point where the big AI companies have scraped the entire internet, essentially. All of the Wikipedia articles, like all of the Twitter posts, all of the Reddit posts, and they're using this to train their AI. But they've essentially run out of data to train on now. And that creates like this really lucrative market for data brokers to be able to go after more personal data. And I think that is going to start impacting chat applications soon as well. And I think it's going to be hard for some of those centralized companies to say no. If they come up against an AI company that's like, okay, we'll pay you, billions and billions of dollars for your users' messages that they send through the service to train our AI on. And that is really scary because I think that data is going to be very useful, because if you think about the way that AI applications are trained and the way that we use those AI applications, it's mostly chatbots, right? Like we're mostly talking to chatbots. And chatbots are trying to emulate the experience of like talking to another human. So what better data to train on than the actual conversations of humans? And, WhatsApp, for example, is a massive source if they were able to tap into that data. I think that's going to become more common, companies making agreements with AI companies to sell the user data to train on. And I think that's when Session fits in really nicely, because people are not going to want to be having their personal data sold to these AI companies to train on, because it's extremely sensitive data. And I think Session offers a safe haven or a safe harbor for people's messages. We can't sell your data to AI
because you don't have it.
We don't have it, exactly. So I think that's where kind of I'm seeing the AI and stuff, and I'm also thinking, okay, I think this is going to be good for us long term because of how that market is developing and the way that we're pushing back against that.
Do you think one of the countermeasures that these, I'm not sure who's gonna do it, the messaging apps or the AI companies, they're gonna try to incentivize users to maybe open doors for sharing some? They will tell them some of your data, or they will do it in a sneaky way, because we've seen examples where people discovered after a while, like for example, on your smartphone, you discover that the application has more privacy settings that should be open, so the users would not know about it. What do you think the route that they might try to try?
I think they're going to try everything that they can. I think, some of the more centralized companies like Meta, which obviously owns WhatsApp and Instagram and Messenger. I think, I'm not sure, but I think that they may just go like wholesale and just start selling users data without, informing users that they're doing that. I think their terms of service would potentially already allow that kind of access to users data, so they wouldn't actually necessarily need to, clear that with users or offer them a financial incentive. For some of the more kind of privacy-based messages, they may look into, how can we incentivize users to be able to provide this data to us with an opt-in kind of structure. But that's going to be more expensive than just using the user's data under the terms of service that you already have applied. And if an AI company is looking at, okay, who we should buy our data from, they're going to go with the cheapest option, right? As long as that data is high quality. So I think they'll still be incentivized to kind of talk to these providers that are, very much in the gray market when it comes to users' data. We've seen that, Meta doesn't have the best track record when it comes to protecting user data.
Someone might ask you, Kee, they say, okay, we got it. user privacy first, all the measures you mentioned, the technology that run it, how you incentivize actually the people who runs the node, the community. The question that comes, how you make money? How what's is there a monetization by any mean, or like is it like just a community project?
So, I mean, I guess I would say it's a bit of both. Like the Session Foundation that's based in Switzerland is actually a non-for-profit.
Mm,
So it's not seeking to kind of make billions and billions of dollars, like providing this messaging service. But it is important that Session stays sustainable. And I think the way that, Session developers and the foundation are looking at that right now, and what we've kind of made steps towards and that we're implementing right now is a premium or a freemium model. So very similar to what Telegram is doing with Telegram Premium, where you have most of the users that use Telegram don't use Telegram Premium, but Telegram Premium offers this kind of subscription service that you can sign up for. It's like $4.99 a month, and it provides you with additional features in Telegram. So that's like, you get this nice like animated avatars, you get the ability
yes.
to send more messages, pin more chats, faster downloads, larger files. Those are the things that power users really like to use on these messaging service. And I think we've seen Telegram be very successful deploying that and actually getting a lot of users signing up for it. So I think for Session, the model will be similar, and that's what we're calling Session Pro. It's not actually fully deployed yet. We're getting ready for the beta of Session Pro, but it'll be a similar idea. Users will pay, say $4.99 a month or some price, and that price then goes back into the network in a kind of indirect way to incentivize the node network, which is running the entire Session service. So that keeps things sustainable, because you can't just give out tokens infinitely. Like eventually, the people will say like, oh, it's just, there's a lot of inflation going on here. You actually need to have some funds coming back into the system to balance out those equations. And that's where Session Pro comes in.
So, and I believe these payments would be crypto-based payments.
Well, ideally, the way that we'll be able to work this out is that, users will be able to pay via Apple Pay or Google Pay. And then third-party payment providers may convert that into Session tokens, and then those Session tokens get burned, and then they're able to be reminted back to the Session node network, which is the node network, which runs the entire infrastructure for Session. So the hope is that, we don't have to have, most users don't understand crypto, right? So most people understand that, so we would like people to be able to pay with Apple Pay or Google Pay, which people are very familiar with. Like when you purchase something in app, you just press the Apple Pay button, you pay, and then on the back end, that fiat value is converted into tokens, which actually power the entire network. So that's the way we're thinking about it. There will also be crypto payment options as well. But the vast majority of users, I think, will be engaging with the system from something that they already know, which is Apple Pay or Google Pay.
Yeah. So the reason I asked, because if I don't have to put my email, my phone, why I would put my payment? But again, I understand you want to create the frictionless experience for the users who might not be familiar with the crypto, which also makes a lot of sense. Now,
Yeah, I think it's like you kind of have two routes. So like one is for the users that are seeking the maximum privacy, and they can go to a website and they can pay via crypto directly,
right.
To be able to enable themselves to use Session Pro. And then the other route is for the users that are already familiar with Apple Pay or Google Pay. We still want to provide them like a high level of privacy so that there isn't an exposure of, say, their personal payment information to us or
Right.
third party that's processing the payments. But for those users, they're going to find it hard to get into crypto. And we still want to enable them to be able to kind of incentivize the network long term. Otherwise, we'll be missing out on a lot of people. So you kind of have two systems that people can use. And depending on where they want to set their privacy level at, they can use the more private one, or they can just use the easier one that's more familiar to them.
Got it. Now, just for the audience who might be watching or listening to us today, and maybe it's their first time they hear about Session, Is it accessible from any place, or they might need to do some extra steps to be able to use the app?
I think that's the great thing about Session, and the thing that we've focused on a lot is having Session on basically every place that you would think it would be on. So it's on iOS in the App Store, it's on Google in the Google Play Store, it's on desktop, Mac, Linux, and Windows. So you can download it on any of those places, and then you can kind of link your accounts together as well. So you can have, synchronization between what, the messages you send on your phone versus like your desktop clients. They can sync the messages and everything can be kind of in the same place. That's something that we've seen a lot of messages, that they might not have the best system to synchronize messages between mobile and desktop, and you need to have one client open at the same time. We didn't want that to be the user experience, and we wanted Session to be as widely available as possible. So there isn't any additional steps that you need to do to install Session. Although, like, if you want more privacy and you're using, a locked down Linux system, you can download it that way. Or if you're using, you're using Google and you want to install the APK directly and you don't want to go to the Google Play Store, you have an option to download through F-Droid or install the APK directly. So it's again about that, I talked about, providing the most privacy option, and then also the option that people are probably going to use because they're familiar with it. So Session tries to do both. Like, we allow all the super privacy people to get it in the way that they get their applications, but also it's just on the app stores, so you can download and start using it straight away.
Do I have to be connected to the Tor network? Because again, maybe some people they would.
No. Like the entire onion routing system, and if you think, not everyone will be familiar with what onion routing is.
Right.
The simple way to think about it is most people understand what a VPN is. That allows you to connect to another server, which changes your location. Onion routing is a more advanced version of VPN, where you're kind of chaining different kind of VPN servers together, and there's added layers of encryption in there as well, which break up the trust assumptions. Because typically when you're using a VPN, you're trusting the VPN provider, and the onion routing adds in unrelated hops and additional encryption so that you don't actually have to trust a single operator in the network. And that entire onion routing system in Session is built into the application. So you don't need to download another application to get Session working. You just download Session and you start using onion routing immediately. And there's no setup involved in that. So that's really good from an ease of use perspective.
Yeah, so the onboarding experience, the journey from downloading to signing up, to get into the network is so easy.
Well, yeah, we spent so much time on onboarding as well, like getting that process optimized. I think we're actually at a better level than most of the other messaging applications which require a phone number, because in most of the other messaging applications, you enter your phone number, you have to get an SMS, then you have to type in the number in the SMS, and then you've got an account. With Session, you just create the account and you can start sending messages immediately. You don't have to receive that text message verification. So I think we're actually faster now to onboard onto Session than some of the centralized messaging applications.
Super cool. It's an annoying thing for me, especially when I get a new phone, for example. I need to get my to convince, let's say, WhatsApp or like the others, like, hey, like this is the same number, it's just like now in another phone. So the authentication mechanism, I liked it. Of course, it provides the anonymity, which is we talked about, and why it's important, the privacy. But this user experience, I'm a little bit like kind of, I'm not a designer by any mean, but anything which enhance the UI UX. I fall in love with these like very frictionless experiences, and very obvious, like you have that Kee. As we are almost come to an end, any final thought you want to share with us? And of course, it's a traditional question where people can get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for people to consider their privacy when they're using applications. I think a lot of people, when they hear about privacy first, they kind of dive headfirst into it, and they might get a bit overwhelmed with the amount of options that are out there. people will look to change their email service, their messaging service, their, Drive or backup service. And if you try and change all of them at once, it can, be overwhelming. I'd suggest if you are looking more into privacy, try to just swap out one thing at a time. So, you may be thinking about email and how your privacy works there. Maybe you want to switch to one of the providers like Proton Mail or Tutor, I think is another one. You start there, you see how it works for you. If it works for you there, then you go to the next thing. So maybe it's messaging, or maybe you want to think about, how to back up your files using Google Drive or something like that. Maybe you want to look at a more private service there. So I'd say take it step by step. I think Session offers a really good option in the messaging space. There's other options out there. Signal's really good if you're looking for something that's based on a phone number. But if you are looking for that maximum privacy, I think Session is really good and the best offering that's out there for that maximum level privacy. In terms of how to get in touch, I think we're on Twitter. So just look up Session. If you just Google Session, we're really good ranking right now. It'll be the first thing that shows up. And that's where you can get the links to download all of the applications. If you're in the Google Play Store or the App Store, just search Session and you'll find us with the green S.
Great. Of course, I will make sure all the links so you can have it in the show notes if you're listening on your favorite podcasting app. If you're watching, of course, you get it in the description. Just, as a side note, because you mentioned, about the shifting. So I think this is a startup idea. If someone is listening to me now, make a migration tool from, any traditional, whatever, as you mentioned, mail, cloud storage, messaging app, maybe from WhatsApp to Session. So this would be a good business, I believe, if you charge people to migrate your life from, these public services to a more private service. Jokes aside, thank you very much, Kee, for this enlightening session. I think it's an important topic, and when I was reached out by your team, I got hooked because privacy, we discuss it all the time, coming somehow from a cybersecurity background. I was both as a consultant and then later from business perspective. We talk a lot about privacy, both in businesses and on personal side. And I always say, if you protect your data on a personal level, you would try to apply it on a business level also as well. So it was a very good, enlightening, I would say, experience to me to speak to you, Kee. And of course, I'm gonna on board on Session very soon. Yeah, thank you. And as this is the way I end my episode. This is for the audience. We mentioned the links will be in the show notes, or if you're watching on YouTube. If you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, give me a favor, subscribe and share it with your friends and colleagues. As you see, we're trying to make an impact. We're trying to get new concepts, important topics to discuss, and I would like to be able to reach to as much people as possible. And if you are one of the people who keeps coming again and again, thank you very much for the support, for the messages, for keeping the podcast this year. I know maybe you are bored from me now. In 2025, we get on the top 200 podcast chart every week in multiple countries. Of course, we keep changing countries. I'm pushing for some. Australia came before Kee, by the way. So we did it in Australia. We did it in New Zealand. I'm looking for some new countries to see on the top 200. US, I'm waiting for you. And I'm waiting also for other countries as well. And thank you also for all the people who supported on the book launch From Nowhere to Next, which is now available on all, websites, wherever you get your books, and Amazon mainly. And again, stay tuned for a new episode very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.